I'm going to start off by asking you all a question, and how many of you have been dragged into an Ikea by a loved one? Yeah, and are they still a loved one? That's the big one. So Ikea is one of these funny things that kind of blew up and got really popular because of a phenomenon known as the Ikea Effect, which is an actual thing. And if you're able to grumble your way through the impossible instructions, this is my normal daily face, by the way. I put on another one when I come here. If you're able to make your way through the instructions and actually get something built, then you might experience the phenomenon known as the Ikea Effect. There's actual science behind this, as my next slide will show you, that talks about this, and there's been papers done on the Ikea Effect. So the Ikea Effect basically says that we will place a higher valuation on something if we play a part in its creation. And you'll see this by the prolific rise of Instagram photos of people making coffee tables out of pallets. Nobody's going to buy a coffee table made out of a pallet. But if you make it, you're like, this is amazing. I'm really proud of this. And so that is based on a phenomenon known as self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is defined as a person's belief in their ability to carry out a task. And so if you are able to do something and able to play a part in the creation of a product, then you will feel the self-efficacy, you'll feel a higher level of competence. And according to this paper, it was a 1994 paper from Stanford University, so it means that it's actual science. So people who believe in their own self-efficacy recover quicker from failures and setbacks. They're better at coping with challenges, and they're actually less vulnerable to stress and depression, which is pretty interesting. And I think it's something that's really beneficial for this community. I mean, a lot of us like to DIY stuff like taxes and things like that, which is great. And when we're able to figure out these problems, we're able to build our self-efficacy, feel a little bit more competent, and then able to push through any kind of failures or setbacks or fears that we might have, thanks to this ability of self-efficacy. And we can come up with some creative problem solving to get around things that stand in our way. So I decided to do some experiments, and I found this homeless man in the street. I brought him home in this wheelbarrow so I could experiment on him.
Those Crocs are too nice. He's not homeless.
No, he's not. Actually, that's my father. He's in the wheelbarrow because he had just had his hip replaced. That kind of exemplifies him in a nutshell. He was super happy to get his hip replaced. He loves staying in the hospital. I don't know why. And then he refuses to do things like get a wheelchair or anything like that. So he came over to my house and my kids were playing outside. He wanted to watch, so I threw him in the wheelbarrow and brought him out there. I bring him into this story because of his background has kind of led me into the DIY space in a lot of different ways. He was drafted into the war in Vietnam, and when he came back, he went through his trauma by kind of going off of the grid, teaching himself a lot of different skills. He taught himself how to speak Thai and started a company importing antiques from Southeast Asia. He also bought a dilapidated house in the middle of nowhere and tore it down and built a new one, and has been building onto it ever since. He started a tree work business about 15 years ago in his early 60s, and learned how to do tree work, climb up a tree with ropes and a chainsaw, and he's only cut off one knuckle, which is pretty good. He's also an incredible artist. He was actually my art teacher in high school. He got a degree in France, a master's degree in art, which is where he met my mother. And so he had that skill as well and was able to work as an art teacher for a while I was in high school. He joined me in my high school, which I hated. But it was really important for him. It gave him extra time to be with me and kind of see me growing up. And so So that was just another set of skills there. I mean, his skill level has been very diversified, and I guess the point of this is that if you're ever thinking about learning a skill or trying something new, a lot of people think, well, it's a little bit late in my life. I'm a little bit too old for this. I've learned all the things that I need to know. But you really can. You can always learn new things. It doesn't matter how old you are. This is one of his drawings that he made for me for my birthday card. And yes, you can learn a new thing. It doesn't matter how old you are or what the new thing is or what your background is. You always have the space to learn a new thing. And so I want to tie this into our community. We're all building community. And it doesn't really matter what your skill set is, what area you are more into or not. We're all building this community together with our separate pieces. So this is a barn that was built by a friend of mine who does amazing timber frame work. And he built this for a customer. I wired it for him. And the customer he was a doctor. He worked, 60 hours a week or so. And his real passion in life was woodworking. And so he had this barn built to be a wood shop at his house. So when he gets home from work, he goes out into his wood shop and he builds things like this. And this is a pen that he gave me as a thanks for wiring his barn. And it's things like this. So in the terms of the DIY space, to bring it back into my kind of niche here, is we're building community with our skills. With the DIY space, we are building our own local communities. We are helping our own local communities with our skills. For me, as an electrician, my community knows me as the guy to call if their lights go out. If there's a power outage coming up, they want to get a generator, they call me up. I know how to do that stuff, and I can go help them out. And I've been getting paid by people, certainly in terms of money, because I run a business and I have to charge money. But I also get people that are paying me in, meat from their farm or other products that are more prevalent in Massachusetts these days. But so. But it's all part of that community building where we're all kind of recognizing that we all have these strengths and weaknesses, and we can all kind of connect through them and build a better community with these things. And so when it comes to building a skill, I recently wanted to get into blacksmithing, or I've been thinking about blacksmithing for a very long time. And I thought, I've been watching YouTube videos on it, because that's where we turn to YouTube videos about how to learn a thing, right? And so I go to these YouTube videos, and there's these guys that have like these giant power hammers and these huge anvil setups, and they have tens of thousands of dollars worth of equipment. And I'm thinking like, boy, I'd love to start this, but I'm not gonna spend $20,000 to try a hobby and maybe find out that I don't like it. And so I didn't do it for the longest time until I found another YouTube video of a guy who said, you want to start blacksmithing? Dig a hole in your yard, fill it with charcoal briquettes, and use a hairdryer, and there's your forge. And you find something that's flat and hard, and there's your anvil. So this is my first forge. This is you might recognize the wheelbarrow. It's a very versatile wheelbarrow. So I filled it full of sand. I got some charcoal briquettes. I stole my wife's hairdryer, and I blew it into a pipe in there. And using this forge and a small vise that I found in my garage when I bought my house, I was able to take a piece of rebar and make a knife. And it's ugly and sharp, and it was really fun. And I had a blast with it. And since then, I've been able to progress a little bit to make this back scratcher for my wife, which she lost. Very soon after I gave it to her, she dropped it behind the entertainment center. But it's this process of developing your skill without necessarily, spending a whole lot of money on something like this. If you want to try something, you don't have to invest your whole life into it. You can kind of just find a way to dabble a little bit, put your toes in it. If it feels good, go a little bit further with it. And I haven't gotten particularly far with this. I've been able to make some pretty neat things like this bracelet for my wife, which was a lot of fun. And I still my forge now is not a wheelbarrow full of sand, but it's something that I made for about $100. And I haven't spent anything on this basically except for propane. And so I've been able to build this skill that I can then use to improve my community by making things like back scratchers and bracelets and hooks. During COVID, when my kids' school was shut down, we got together with some families and we created a homeschool pod. And so some friends of ours have this great big barn, it's a beautiful space, and we managed to hire a teacher who's amazing, and we got a bunch of kids into this barn, and I was able to help out and make some coat hooks. So I made some hooks where they could come and hang their backpacks and their coats and stuff, and then when the barn school was over, they could bring them home, and I personalized them, put the kids' names on them and stuff, and it was a lot of fun. And that was just another aspect where I was able to give a little bit to help my community feel a little bit more comfortable. And it just in this little skill that I've been kind of putting together over time and not really spending much on, and just my downtime, which I appreciated doing anyways. And so another aspect of these skills that I wanted to get into here was dealing with anxiety, especially with looking at an expanse of time. When we're working, we have a schedule. You go to work, you get home, you have a little bit of time to cook dinner, and then put the kids to bed and crash on the couch for an hour before you fall asleep. And then that versus 40 years of just open time, and that's terrifying. And what do you do with that? And we don't really think about that until we're kind of at the precipice of it often. And then so it's, well, what am I going to do with that time? And I have to do something that feels good to me, and even better, helps the community out a little bit. And so if you're able to take some of that time to learn some skills like this, you can use your hands with it, you can build your self-efficacy, you can feel a little bit more competent, you can help out your community a little bit in the process. It can really give you a real sense of purpose to fill that time with and to spend your retirement in, which I think is a really important process. I am currently nowhere near retirement, but I am looking at the idea of, what am I going to do? And in that process, thinking about what my ideal day would look like. And I think it would be several hours of doing some kind of a project where I can come out of the end of it with a product that I can say, I made this, I made the world a little bit better in this little way. It might look horrible or it might look beautiful, doesn't really matter. I had fun doing it and I added something to it. So another beautiful aspect of this is bringing your kids into it and giving them a little taste of something different, So this is my daughter here pulling a 2,500 degree piece of steel out of my forge. We like to live on the edge. So, and she made this little hook out of this piece of metal. It's, it looks like a 6-year-old made it. She was 6 at the time, but she loves that thing. And it's, it's so much fun to watch her do it. And she was stepping out of her comfort zone in this one, as is my son here when I took him camping in the winter with a tarp. And so now he wants to do this for his birthday. I'm actually taking him and his friends out to go camping in the woods under a tarp in 40-degree weather. And so, we stepped out of our comfort zone in a big way and learned some really great skills in this process too, notably how to camp without a tarp, which is also a lot of fun, to just go out with nothing and see what you can do with it and see how you can build yourself some kind of a life out of nothing, which is kind of a great metaphor for what we're all doing here, is building ourselves a life out of more or less nothing. You might get a lot of hate. Some people might think you're doing something silly. This is my brother being silly, learning a new skill. We're taking a welding class together, which is something that he and I had never done, but we're both really interested. And that's pretty much what we said to everybody that thought it was silly. And we had a great time with it. And I think coming around with all this, there's this real feeling of satisfaction when you come out of a day's work with an end product in your hand, and you can say, I can make stuff. And it doesn't really matter what the stuff is. I can make stuff. I can learn how to make stuff. I can learn how to make whatever I want because I know how to learn how to make stuff. And I can learn how to do it in such a way that fits with my lifestyle, that fits in my budget, and gives me an introduction into whatever it is that I want to learn. Any way that I can use my hands to build my self-confidence, my competence, and my place in the community. Which really leads me to the final point, which is enjoy the now. And that's it. Thank you.